Hello, this is a video reply to Joe Vegan123. We've been in some conversation in various of my videos about my epistemology. He's made a video reply that I'll link below to one of my favorite videos of mine, maybe the most, that goes into the first person and third person conceptions of the ego. And I make an important distinction here. I mean, this video, I think, if you follow it closely, really explains a lot of the confusion, because I think a lot of us aren't making this distinction, and I do, and explains why people might get confused about some of the things I say and the way I say them regarding these things. Basically, a quick recap is that, to me, there's a solipsistic view of self, and there's a third-person view of self. The solipsistic view of self is inherently fundamental because that's how you have to start. Your evidence all comes to you personally. You know of your own, you're experiencing your own subjectivity before you come up with this idea, intellectually at least. I mean, we're programmed as evolutionary creatures to make certain assumptions, quote-unquote, out of order. But in terms of analyzing the situation, you have to analyze the information you get solipsistically. You develop an idea of materialism through perceptions that matter, that have consistency, and you get an idea of these material objects that are related to these material facts. And only then can you conceive of yourself as one of those objects. And there is no way then to take this third-person view of self and say that's what's generating it all, and forget about that first-person view of self, because you can't, put the house under the foundation. Okay. Now, he mentions, because I talk about Descartes, that I follow Descartes' view, basing everything in some sort of mental, cognitive space. I think, therefore I am. Well, I said this in the video, and I made a comment that he said was obscure, and that's fine, but, and thank you, Joe Vegan, for making your reply, but I just don't want to take it easy on you, but rather treat you honestly. So that might have seemed obscure, but basically, Descartes, I think therefore I am, is not at the end of the meditations. It's like the end of the first meditation. There's another couple books, if I recall correctly, afterwards, where he climbs out of his skepticism basically by saying God wouldn't fool him so bad that he has to have that view, that minimal view. So he uses logic to get down there and pulls himself out with a lot of assumptions about God. And that's what I was referring to. Furthermore, so the point is, he stops at I think therefore I am, and then turns around and goes back up. So furthermore, as you pointed out and I point out in my video, we don't know that I think that assumption is not actually correct. Descartes stopped at an error. It was commendable given the time and the philosophy of the time to even go that deep. But as far as I know, Nietzsche introduced into Western philosophy this fact that Descartes actually had made an assumption that wasn't evident, because, as all of those of you who don't believe in will should understand, I think is not an assertion. It's an open question. We have questions that adhere to this I think question, because we might not be doing the thinking, but simply the result. Like, we're the result of the brain. The thinking is the result of the brain doing us. Right? So whether that's true or not, it's at least a possibility. He didn't really get to a fundamental indeniability. So with that gate open, I've gone a little deeper into places the skeptics had already gone, which is this fountain of appearances. The appearances are what gives us a definition for existence. Because things appear to me, because a word for that is I perceive, a verb. Because of my perceptions and that I perceive. Or you could say I'm having thoughts. These words back off of the causal direction, of assuming which direction, and just establish a relationship. And you can do that, and that you have perceptions becomes a lot like an a priori truth. It's just true before you can even consider anything else. But it's not a priori because it's a synthetic truth. It's established by looking at the state of affairs in the world. So it's the ultimate synthetic truth, which relates to the synthesizer, because the perceiver is whatever it is synthesis is happening. So even if somebody else is responsible for the synthesis, it's the synthesizer. Your perceptions come through, you see a bunch of colors, they get synthesized into an object. You see a bunch of objects, they're synthesized into, you know, an apple tree, a complex object. You see a bunch of complex objects, you synthesize it into an ecosystem. And these are all perceptions, and you're dealing with what's apparent and your own logic and reasoning about how to best do empirical reasoning. Okay, your final thing was that you were saying to even say a statement like, hey, perceptions are fundamental, or I forget which one you used. All the terms have to be defined. Okay, so it's the terms that are fundamental. But be that as it may, because, you know, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think you could probably have this thought non-verbally, possibly be interesting to discuss. Doesn't really matter, because we know where the words come from, and they come from perception. We know from childhood development how children learn words, and it's through observation, and we know that. So yeah, that means that perception is the fundament, because you have to use perception to get the words. All right, cheers. Thanks again for the reply.